Does anybody know the jokes?
Hey, are you guys ready to go? Yeah. All right, well, I want to welcome everybody to our conference. My name is Mark Harvey. I am the MBA Program Director at the University of St. Mary, and I'm super excited to be here. You see I've got like this fancy AI and Oz thing, consistent with our theme, of course. The theme that I want to sort of like start off with is that we're kind of in uncharted territory when it comes to AI. It's not been all that long that AI has been universally accessible to just about anybody that's got a device here, right? So it's uncharted, our uncharted yellow brick road, if you will. We've got powerful tools with unclear paths. I think a lot of us have really high hopes. I mean, like, I don't know if any of you have used AI very much before, or maybe you're just starting to get into it, but there's certainly a lot of promise. There's a lot of concern, particularly in the academic community, about how students are using it, and so that's certainly something we want to talk about. And so the students are trying to figure it out as they go. We're trying to learn as we go. Most university people that I've talked to don't actually have official AI policies in place, right? You may have like some departmental level, but some universities are like, I don't even know what to do with this yet. And so there is a sort of learning as you go aspect sort of happening. So this is a question of trust, right? Should AI be revered like the mighty Oz, or approached with caution as a possible charlatan? So, hey, if we're off to see the wizard, are we going to be disappointed by the time we get there? Which, of course, our heroes in the story kind of were, in a way. So let's draw back the curtain and see what's here, right? So as educators, I think we're kind of like Toto, okay? We're drawing back the curtain. We're going to expose what's back there. Now, whether or not this is something that's very promising or full of peril or a little bit of both, that's really what we want to share with our students, and that's really what I want to talk a little bit about today, right? Let's expose AI for what it is. So one of the things that I like to do when I give talks like this is I want to talk not just from an educator standpoint, but also from a student standpoint. You know, I know it's sort of weird to do those things together. I don't have any probably students in the room, maybe not many. But I think it's important to understand things from the student's perspective, like what are they doing, how are they doing it, and so that's another theme that we want to sort of weave through in this presentation as well. So students need to know how educators view AI, so they use it properly, they use it ethically. Educators also need insight into students' motivations and usage, right? We kind of know why they're doing it, right? How are they doing it? And if we understand what those challenges are, then it might help us guide them or warn them in certain ways. We think of students as the content creators, right? And we think of a lot of what they may be doing with AI as cheating. And in fact, that's how we normally see students anyway. I mean, even pre-AI, it's like, okay, they're producing the content, we're judging the content, we're grading, we're evaluating. So it's all about them and what they're creating, whether they're doing a good job, whether or not they're cheating, and so on, right? But I also want to flip that for a second, because those of us who have used AI, we're content creators too. Right? And so I want to start by looking at that a little bit before we start going down the road of what the students are doing. So like I said, I'm the director of the MBA program. As a business program, we are interested in AI, right? If other businesses are using AI, then we want to make sure that our students are familiar with it, right? It's an important tool for them. So I've had to have a real awareness and kind of be on the cutting edge of this. We've actually developed a new AI concentration at the University of St. Mary. So the idea is trying to get students into that environment and learn how to use it properly and ethically and so on. I've attended multiple workshops on the use and integration of AI in business and education. Say a little bit more about those gurus here in a little bit. And I'm a frequent user of AI for a number of education-related projects. Basically what I thought I would do in order to do this presentation is I thought I would use AI to help me build this presentation. And so I wanted to tell you kind of what my journey was like in terms of doing that and how that all happened. So here's the step-by-step what we're going to go through here. First of all, we'll talk briefly about the magic of AI because it is magical, right? We're in Oz, we're all about the magic. So we'll mention that here first. Then I want to talk about the demystification of AI, right? What my journey was like in terms of preparing that presentation. Then we'll talk about some other things I think are really important that come logically out of this. Ethical implications, appropriate use, some of the limitations, and what I think a lot of you are going to be really interested in, hopefully, strategies for dealing with student use. But all of this is important in terms of understanding the context of what AI can do, what it can't do, what its limitations are. Right. So the magic of AI, we have Linda the Good Witch. So it's a very powerful tool, as I mentioned before. It's used widely in industry. It's used widely in our industry, increasingly so, right? If there was a bunch of you who sort of nodded your heads when I said, have you used it before? I mean, we're using it a lot. Students need AI literacy for future success, so potentially there's a career advantage thing here. And when used appropriately, it's got a lot of positive potential. So let me tell you a little bit about how I went through trying to build this presentation using AI. So I started, the most obvious place I thought, maybe ChatGPT. I already had a lot of notes, a lot of information, a lot of stuff that I wanted to talk about. So I took this massive information, copied and pasted it, stuck into ChatGPT, and then I stuck in the title of my presentation and the abstract, and I said, please make me an outline, right? Organize this stuff that I have. And it did a pretty reasonably good job at that. I was like, hey, okay, that saved me some time. I'm happy with that. That's awesome. But what happened next is it also offered to do other things for me. So the next thing it did is it said, would you like me to put it in a PowerPoint for you with Oz-themed graphics transitions based on my recommendations? That is, Mark, my recommendations. So I had a little back and forth with it. I said, hey, that would be great. You know, here's some things that I want. You know, I want the theme to sort of like look like this. And you know, I was thinking a little more like the 1900 era graphics, like in the original novel, that kind of thing. And let's see what it would come up with, right? So this is what it tells me, and this is after a number of iterations. It says, hey, yes, I'm ready to create the full Oz-themed PowerPoint presentation for you now, with all the visuals, icons, animations, original Wizard of Oz style, and a few wicked touches too. Here's what I'm building. Storybook style design referencing the original 1900 artwork. Oz-inspired visuals, Emerald City greens, yellow brick road textures, ruby slipper accents, character icons, Scarecrow, Tin Man, Lion, Glenda, etc. Light animations and cohesive slide layouts, a sprinkle of wicked for moderns, flair, give me 3 to 5 minutes. I'm like, all right, it is cool, right? So if it can spit that out that quickly, then even if it's not perfect, right, I can play with that. So that's a nice foundation. So I thought, okay, yes, chat, please, let's do this thing. I asked it to do what it recommended, and this is what I've got. First of all, I got a blank white presentation. just words, and it's blank white. Second, I said, hey, you didn't do all the things you were going to do. Could you please do this? Next, same presentation, colored background. One was red, one was green, one was yellow. And on the third attempt, I'm like, okay, you're still not getting it. Then they give me a white background with a colored font on it, okay? So kind of a little short of those expectations, right? Then it apologized to me and offered to make me a kit of images in a zip file because it thought it would be more efficient about doing this. So we did this over a few sessions. Sometimes the zip files were empty. Some had odd file types that weren't visual files at all. They weren't anything that were even usable. They never included more than one image inside a single zip file, so why it didn't just give me the file instead of inside a zip file, I don't know. Some of the pictures were really good and some were not. Okay, so here's some examples. Like this one right here I thought was really good. Like I put it on the front of it and it's like, hey, you got Dorothy and you got the Emerald City and a nice little tech-looking tornado. That's kind of cool looking. I like that, right? And it also has this one I thought was very impressive looking. Now, why the yellow brick road would be going through Kansas and why the shoes would be so big, it's got to be perspective, right? You know, okay, that's kind of cool. And then I got like this weird professor guy with a TV and a drip bag or something. I don't know. And then here's the cast, I guess, right? We got Professor Beard and Robert Redford or something carrying an Apple device and a Scarecrow professor. And is Dorothy a college student? I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of confused by this. But this is, I don't know, it's fun. I'm being amused at least, not getting the job done, but it's very entertaining. Right? So then over time, the images got a little bit better, right? So this is a nice one. This one is actually kind of in the style of what I was looking for, this kind of 1900 kind of thing. But it never delivered the PowerPoint. Not in the way that I asked for, not in the way it offered, keep in mind. I didn't ask for it. It told me that it could do this, and all I did was say yes. And this is the adventure that I got dragged into. So I'd either get a plain white one or to run out of processing for the day. That's the other thing. It would say, okay, sorry, you're out of time, we gotta wait till tomorrow. And usually wait till tomorrow was really frustrating because after me keep saying, well, you still haven't done it, you still haven't done it. Oh, sorry, out of time. Check in again tomorrow. So this is one of the apologies, right? Let me know if anything's missing or when you're ready to share it with the world from the Emerald City, right? It just sent me something very excitedly. I'm like, there is nothing in this zip file, right? Oh, you're absolutely right. I owe you a huge apology. After all of this back and forth and all of your patience, getting a blank zip file is completely unacceptable. You've trusted me, and I've promised more than once that I get it right. Let's fix it for real, right now. I got to know Chat pretty well. And I thought, hey, while Chat is working on this, let me try a different AI. Hey, let's see if another one's faster. So I go over to Gamma, and Gamma is supposed to be good at producing presentations via AI. So I took all the stuff that the ChatGPT said it could do, and then I copied and pasted it inside Gamma to see what would happen, right? So it gave me a template in a few minutes and a few appropriate pictures. This font here, I had to change the size of the font, but it gave me this plain black background. It gave me a pretty picture, right? And some other pretty pictures that I'm gonna share with you here in a little bit, but not all of it was super quality, right? So like this one looks really nice. Then you've got, I don't know, sort of like laser beam shooting in the middle of a high-tech Blade Runner Oz with Chinese stop signs. I don't know. Oh, and I think this one is my favorite. Oh yeah. I don't even know what to do with this, right? So I assume this is like emo teen Dorothy or something in witch garb, and I don't even know what she's got down here. I don't know, like, is this shoe polish or is it tobacco? Not sure, and I don't know what this thing is that she's talking to, a rabbit, fox, leopard, something? So, hey, it's great, right? In the meantime, like I said, I take that, I think, okay, this is a nice PowerPoint I can work with. I come back to it, go back to Chat, check in with Chat. I ask Chat, why did it take days to do what Gamma could do in only minutes? And Chat says, because it was customizing each slide and running out of processing capacity, right? It would have been nice if they could have not offered in the first place or told me this, right? But that's okay. So it was, and I said, why is it promising things it can't deliver? It says, it asked me to upload the Gamma presentation, the one that I just got, and said that it would definitely produce it immediately if it didn't have to do the basic template. So give me the Gamma one, and I'll make it even better for you, because there will be, I don't have to do as much processing. You won't run out of time. I'm like, all right, cool, Chat. Let's see what you can do. So result, failure again, okay? It still promised to deliver, but it said that Gamma or Canva might suit my needs better. Take all my stuff, stick it in Canva, see how things turn out there. Well, what I discovered here is that it makes very attractive slides, and it does it really quick. That's awesome. It's great. The pictures are also not quite as impressive. I get the full wizard Oz. We get green witches and stuff. I don't know, is this the Blair Witch? This is like freaking crazy. I don't want to know what are in those bags. There's this one. I don't know, we got the Handmaid Witch. But she's very merry. She's happy, right? Then we got this one. Something's praying at a fire pit. Something's standing in the corner. I don't know, Blair Witch again or something. But she looks very domesticated, very happy. Like I said, I don't know what to do with any of this except for share it with you because it's that awesome. Oh yeah, now we're gonna start setting stuff on fire. We have vines growing out of our hands. It's it's a little, I don't know what's going on with her face. It's a little bit crazy. Then I thought, all right, let me go to a site that would actually produce pictures, like that's what its purpose is for, see if it does any better, right? So I went to Google Gemini, and this is one of the pictures I got from Google Gemini, and this actually is quite nice. Now, it took me several goes in order to come up with something that works like this, because Google Gemini doesn't respond very well to correction, okay? So for instance, it kept giving me a picture of Toto pulling back the curtain, but there would always be this huge string in the way, like it was laced up, but it was pulling back at the same time. So it was sort of like a paradox. The picture just looked completely wrong. So I'm like, take the string away, take the string away. This is the best I could get. They said, but this one looked nice. Among all of the different ones that I tried, that was great. This one was kind of cool. That's an interesting dark picture, but there are two Totos. It's a little hard to tell. This Toto blends, and this Toto's camouflaged. Oh, this is one of my favorites. The Uret of Beoz, your benade is a hint of this arid yord sieves, thede be your. I spent way too much time trying to make this easy and save time. Do you know how fast I could have done this if I didn't do all of this? Amazing. Just think about what our students are going through if they're trying to do stuff like this, okay? That's one reason why I'm pushing this through, is I want you to think about students too, okay? When I talk to a number of these AI gurus, the people who are really pushing it and saying it's a really good tool and all this stuff, I've gone to some of these conferences, consistently what I hear is that with AI, you have to assume that it's a garbage in, garbage out model. I don't know if you're familiar with this or not, but the idea basically is that you're only going to get out of it as good as what you put into it. So if you don't give it very good prompts, very good directions, then what you're going to get is junk. So what you need to do is improve the kind of input that you put in order to try to improve what's coming out. So hear me out here for a second. I did a presentation on student engagement a couple of weeks in front of the faculty, a couple of weeks ago. And I used just a regular Google to ask a simple question. And you know how nowadays Google, the first thing that pops up is the AI answer, right? So this was my question. What's an average human attention span, right? Because with student engagement, I want them to sort of like get an idea of like, how long can students really hang in before they need to shift activities, right? Is there sort of an average? You know, I'm just curious. I'm looking this stuff up. So Google's answer, and by the way, this is first in the AI section, is 8.25 seconds, less than a goldfish at 9. So, is this true? I don't know, it seemed a little far-fetched to me, like less than a goldfish. I don't know. I mean, like, I have 2 daughters, and they can sit down and focus at something for a very, 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 very long time. I know they're super bright. They're my kids, right? Hey. But, like, I know people who can actually sit down and do something for more than 8.25 seconds. How would any of us get anything done if this were true? So then I go down the page, and it references, I mean, this is the regular section, not the AI section, but all of its references were a study that said that this was true. The entire page, there was nothing to the contrary. So then I was like, okay, Google, is human attention span really less than a goldfish? That was my question. And its answer was, it's a myth. The group that did the study has a questionable reputation. And I wouldn't have known if I didn't ask, are you really sure about this? And all the results on the first page treated that study as if it was true, 100% true. Why? Well, probably because people would share it over and over and over again. The search engine optimization, it picks it up, and it becomes the first result on the page, and so the truth doesn't even get out. And that was just a simple Google search. This wasn't me using any fancy AI or anything like that, although Google AI is probably as good as the rest, probably better. So even when I go to the references, which you always ought to do if you see that little AI thing at the top, the references were horrible. I had to ask the question differently in order to get the truth. So, and the first answer had no mention of the bad quality of its own information, so like I said, I had to press. So, am I the one putting the garbage in, right? Or does the AI in AI not stand for intelligence? I don't know. What is machine learning if the system doesn't learn? We'll turn it around backwards here, right? I think that the problem isn't me, right? And I don't think the problem is you, and I don't think the problem is the students. I think that there's more going on than this, and that the garbage that's coming in isn't coming from us, okay? So what it illustrates is how these machines learn, but they're not learning from me, they're learning from something else. On April 17th, Washington Post reported how Russian organizations are purposely seeding chatbots as a purposeful intent to spread misinformation, particularly about Ukraine. And they did a study, 1 out of 3 chatbots reported this information falsely, right? So in other words, it's possible for, like I said, I don't think that's what happened with the goldfish thing. That's just people like just clicking on it and sharing it and so on, right? But that's the same mechanism that foreign governments are using in order to try to promote misinformation, and doing so successfully, and that's going to be your first hits on many of these pages when you're using chatbots. It's also dangerous as tech companies are cutting back on initiatives to fact check information. So, you know, there's nothing stopping this stuff from being our first results, the first thing that we come out. So if I'm looking for good information on certain topics, I'm subject to the garbage that the internet produces, right? It's not garbage in, garbage out on my side, it's garbage in, garbage out on the general overall public user side. And that's a difficult thing if you're trying to use ChatGPT for something that is like academic, right? Where are you if you don't have information that's accurate? So at this point, I'm feeling a little bit like this lion looks. I asked ChatGPT to do a self-analysis, like how good of a job did you do in helping me out? Like look at our logs and give me data on how you did. So yeah, I want an analysis on the quality of service you have provided on this request. I'm giving you a presentation about AI, so it is worth reporting on my experience. I need you to review our entire log on this project. Here's what I want to know. 1, how many days and how much time have we spent so far? 2, how many times have you failed to give me what I asked for? 3, how many times have you given me inaccurate information? 4, how many times have you apologized to me? And 5, based on my experience, should I recommend ChatGPT as a tool for my fellow educators? So I'm going to just jump to number 4 because it's my favorite, right? But I'll tell you the results of the other in a second, right? How many times have I apologized to you? I've apologized at least 8 to 10 times throughout this process. Sometimes genuinely. Sometimes automatically. I stood and I looked at that and it was like,
that's great.
It was really being sweet. It was trying so hard. Goodness, I'm so happy I was polite because I do not want this thing to be my overlord someday. This is the results. This is what it reported. It says project duration was 7 days. Then we went between April 14th and the 21st. We estimated, this is a little dark, sorry, but 12 to 15 distinct failures, blank, incomplete PowerPoints, broken zips, failed visuals, inaccurate policy flags. Oh, that's another thing I had to tell you about, right? I'd get to the point where we'd almost get what they promised that they were going to give me, and then it would say, I can't produce it because of copyright violations. And then I would tell them, The Wizard of Oz was published in 1900. It is now public domain. And they were like, oh, sorry. Okay, I'll try now. Sorry, out of processing. And then I go through the whole thing. Like, so anyway, so it says two inaccurate policy flags, repeated false assurances, over 10 apologies without resolution. Bottom line, ChatGPT is useful as a brainstorming and writing tool, not as a reliable visual designer. Recommendation, use ChatGPT as a co-creator, not a finisher. Pair it with Gamma, Canva, or collaborators. So what's funny about this is that this isn't accurate either. It couldn't count its own errors. For instance, I wasn't working on this from April 14th to 21st, right? You remember those dates I told you earlier? It wasn't even the 21st yet when they gave me this answer. Like, we're working on this in the future. Like, it's a soothsayer too. It said 12 to 15 distinct failures. There were far more than that. There were actually 4 inaccurate policy flags, like 4 times where it told me that I was violating copyright in some way and I had to correct it again. And definitely more than 10 apologies. I mean, like it would have been more accurate for me to just literally go through the log and count myself. I have used ChatGPT and other AIs in different ways, some effectively, some not so effectively, right? For instance, I put a lot of my lectures up on YouTube and connect with students, especially online students that way. And so I have a YouTube page. I do SEO optimization through ChatGPT because I'm not technically smart enough to know like how to really type the stuff in the back engine so that it will be discoverable on the internet. And so I will say, hey, Chat, could you please, here is the transcript of my presentation. Please give me all the stuff that I need to copy and paste and stick into the back part of YouTube so people can find my videos, right? And generally does a pretty good job, I think. Now, keep in mind, I am not an expert at SEO, so I'm actually doing the thing that students are probably doing when they're using this, and that is trusting the AI because I don't know any better. And none of my stuff has gone viral, so clearly it's I don't know, maybe it's just that people don't want to click in on my global management lectures. I don't know. Idea generation. I think it's really great for idea generation. Like if you say, if you told students to say, hey, you can use AI, you don't have an idea for a paper, well, type in the topic of this paper and, here's some topics, right? I mean, I think that's pretty innocent. And come check back with me, let's discuss the list or whatever, I mean, there's different ways I think you can do that. I've done that successfully before. Game design, right? I gave what I thought was a boring lecture a few weeks ago, and I hate boring, and I'm like, okay, I'm into active learning. Is there some way I can take this thing and turn it into a game instead? And I stuck it into ChatGPT, had 3 ideas for games. I chose one. It was still kind of lame, but I worked with it and over again got it to where I wanted it. And it, I haven't tried it yet, but it's, like I said, something I'm willing to try. I had an ethics discussion the other night with some of my students in global management, and I said, come up with some ethical questions that we can use for discussion. And it did sort of a middle of the road sort of job, was really redundant, but if you keep pushing it and working with it, you can come up with a decent list of topics that you can talk to students about, and that's kind of cool too. And curriculum development as well, right? So as I was actually trying to create the AI concentration for the MBA program, I asked AI, hey, what do you think would be a good curriculum, right? Now, keep in mind that even though it put out a bunch of stuff, I don't know if I could trust it 100%, so I got to actually run it past some real people who, like real human beings, who actually know what they're doing to make sure that we're doing this right, that this is going to actually work. So again, idea generation, but I'm not sure I would absolutely trust it 100%. And that's the huge caveat. You have to be smarter than the AI. If you don't know what AI is already going to deliver to you, then the results are likely to be not very good. I actually had a mishap with one of my faculty. She was redesigning one of our courses. Didn't say anything about using AI, but turned everything in. And she had a list of academic journals that she wanted the students to read on various topics. And so she was working with the librarian to try to get links so the students could link straight to those articles and stuff like that. The librarian looked at it and in short order discovered that some of these journal articles did not exist. Some of them were from predatory journals. And so this was an issue. So I had to turn to my faculty person who's taught for me for many years and say, hey, what's going on here? And she was very profusely apologetic. She said she discovered some of that stuff herself, but it's a harsh lesson that this is happening right now, and if you're not aware of this stuff, if you're not double checking whatever it is that comes out of this thing, then you're not doing a service to your students or to education in general, right? It's like, it is an awesome tool, but it is a very, very flawed tool, okay? So, and this is another thing, again, talking to some of these so-called gurus who are pushing AI and everything. Like I sat in a workshop probably about a month ago and they were showing me how to use all these tools, and it was like, check out how good it is on data analytics. And I could take a spreadsheet, copy and paste it in there, say I want you to do this, blah, 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 and it does all this analysis faster than I could have in terms of just thinking about what models, maybe faster than using an SPSS. I don't know, but it was coming up with some good numbers. But it also then makes me pause for a second and say, well, is it really? It looks like it's doing that, but is it really doing the thing that I'm asking it to do in the way that I am? And so I'm just going to trust those numbers. And that is what I fear, how I fear it may be used in the private sector at the moment, where it's a shortcut and you're thinking, hey, I'm just going to plug this stuff in and get a bunch of answers and I'll save a whole lot of time, when really, if you know what you're doing, then you may be spending more time than just in the process of double checking. And I will add this, I think all responsible users have to be relentless to get those quality results. You can't just assume that what it gives you is something that's going to be quality or accurate. Oh, by the way, this picture's awesome, right? We've got two arms. Tin Man's got a tail. Isn't that nice? Lion's got two tails. Oh, there you go. So, yeah. I still think it's cool. It can do this art in seconds, right? Although if I told it to get rid of the tails, there'd be something else wrong with it, probably. All right, so why am I telling you these stories? First, to illustrate the promise and the limitations of AI. It's amazing, but there are limitations. Second, to understand what students are experiencing in their AI use. It takes grit to make this work, right? Do you think your students are applying that level of grit to AI to get the results that they want? And this is probably a gift for those of you who are concerned about students who are cheating, right? It's like they're using AI, taking the prompt, writing the paper, sending it off to you. It's probably very obvious to you that there's something wrong with this paper, because there will be something wrong with this paper, very likely. Do they have the brains to challenge it when it's not working? And here's the bigger question, are they really going for real brains or the kind that the wizard's passing out? Because I think the way that AI is looked at by many students is a way to cut corners, and a way to save time, a way to not have to do the thought process. And so one of the messages that I want you to take away from this is the inherent importance of education itself, and the necessity to communicate that, to sell that to students, right? We can't make students do something, right? But we can try to sell it to them, then we'll see what happens after that, right? Let's talk about some of the ethical considerations. Beyond many of the considerations I've already talked about, there are a few big ones that are associated with AI. I'm sure you're probably familiar with this. Some of this has to do with intellectual property. I ran into roadblocks whenever I was talking, not all the time, but sometimes when I was talking about The Wizard of Oz, right? There are some real intellectual property issues out here because what's happening is that they take all of this information out there. I mean, including journal articles I wrote, journal articles you all might have written. It all gets thrown in. A lot of this stuff gets put together without attribution, right? And so, the fruits of the world's labor kind of is part of the output, Hopefully the stuff we put in is not the garbage. There are some serious questions about just using this stuff without attribution or using it for free. There are consent issues, data gathered without permission. I mean, I know that I didn't give my permission for the internet to gather up all this stuff in a mass thing and share it in AI, but And then, of course, there's personal integrity, right? It's important for students to just be honest in their academic work, and I think that comes down to the sales that we'll talk about here in a minute. So some of the limitations. There's validity problems, which we talked about. Fabrication, it will make up facts, and also overpromises what it can deliver. Again, I can't imagine why ChatGPT would offer things that it was incapable of doing, right? But that's the way it's programmed. That's the way it is. And that's not to say AI won't get better, right? Maybe there will be some improvements on that. So we're talking about things at this moment in time. Awkward writing, sometimes the recommendations can be strange or inappropriate. Detection risk. Software can also identify AI-generated content, but that isn't totally reliable either, okay? So for instance, I use Turnitin, right? So Turnitin now has a tab feature that allows it to detect AI, right? And I use that a lot. And it gives me, basically it flags whether or not students are using AI or not. The problem is it's not always terribly specific, and it may produce false positives in various ways. So not only will it have a positive, say if a student goes into ChatGPT and it just assumes the output might be something like that, it also might create a false positive, like if students are using Grammarly and then trying to use those recommendations to improve those writings, and then that shows up in their algorithm, and that sometimes flags a false positive as well. Grammarly is mostly okay, although I usually tell students you really probably better double check before you accept all of their recommendations as well. Sometimes that's weird. There are problems in terms of just being able to detect it. And so the choice of throwing the book at the student isn't really, you got to be real careful before you do that, because this is a weird environment. Some of the appropriate uses, right? Brainstorming we talked about. It's a good research springboard. It's good in terms of style recommendations, and again, like I said with Grammarly, consider the recommendations. Don't just absolutely accept them wholesale. And it could be used for learning enhancement. How should an instructor deal with AI when it comes to students in the classroom? Okay, there are different approaches that I've heard from different people who have different ideas. One, of course, is a very hardcore approach, zero tolerance, right? Strict prohibition and penalties, right? So students are not allowed to use any kind of AI whatsoever. If we discover that you're doing it, then you're going to get a 0 for your assignment. This is the same as plagiarizing a paper. And, in some circumstances, I would say that may be true, right? In that, if somebody just takes your prompt, your assignment, sticks in ChatGPT, out comes a paper, they download that and upload that, they didn't write any of it, right? They deserve a 0, okay? But whether or not you punish them in the same way or handle it in the same way as you do a case of plagiarism is another question, right? And so that's where we get down to where I think is number 2, which I've heard from other educators, is we should have a total hands-off approach to this. That is, let the students do what the students are going to do. People in business are using it anyway, and if they miss something in the educational process, it's on them, right? It's not my responsibility. They are showing up to class. They should get out of it what they put into it. I'm kind of sensitive to this position as well, because it's it really is, at some point, it stops being our responsibility at some point. We can do the best we can. We can talk to them, we can persuade them, we can like give them all the benefits of doing things what we would probably consider to be the right way, you know? And it really is up to them. And there is some unfortunate truth to it, is that there's always going to be some cases where we're not going to catch it. It's just, and that's true for plagiarism as well, right? There's some people always going to get away with it. And it's unfortunate, but it's true. Third approach is a more balanced approach. This is something that I try to use when I'm dealing, and I've dealt with a lot of students who have used various forms of AI and turned it in. And sometimes I will recognize it because it just looks weird. There's stuff in there that's not real. Sometimes it'll be a false, or not a false, but it will be a positive on turn it in. The report will come and say, hey, this is it. I'll look at the report. And so I've discovered it. So then what's the next step, right? What do I do at that point, right? So for me, what has worked is that I've emailed a student, contacted them in some way and say, hey, I got this thing that's sort of like flagged on Turnitin. It says you used AI. Can you tell me about this, right? What did you do? How did you use it? Like what happened here, right? And in 100% of the cases where I've done this, the students have said, yes, I used AI. And this is what I've done. And like there's been nobody so far who's just completely denied it. And then what I do is say, okay, well, here's some good ways. It's a learning opportunity for me. Here's some ways you could use it that are helpful. Here's some concerns. A lot of the stuff I already talked to you guys about, only shorter, right? But there's a reason why you need to do it this way, and we need to do this thing differently. And then I give them an opportunity to sort of rewrite it, okay? I give them a new deadline, right? We negotiate a new deadline, but they got that new deadline and that is it, right? It's like late penalties happen after that. But they have to do it. They have to do it right and redo it. So that's the best way, because like for me, I can't just blindly punish a student on what might be a false positive, right? I have to have that conversation. And I think until our detection processes get a whole lot better, that may be the zone that we're living in right now. At least that's sort of my perspective. But number 4, I think, is important too, and this is another thing that I think that I personally do, is that I want to clearly communicate my expectations to start with, right? So I will tell students at the beginning that, like, you know, use of ChatGPT to generate papers is forbidden. Like, you should not be doing this stuff, right? I will talk about some ways in which I think it is appropriate, right? But it's also important to track patterns of misuse, right? If a student screwed up, did ChatGPT or whatever, and I've called them on it, and then they rewrote their paper, that's great, right? But if it happens again, I'm not going to think it's an accident, right? And so that's where you have to start tracking this. Again, it's like I treat it like cases of plagiarism, where, and as a director of a program, it's something that I do program-wide, right? If there's a case of plagiarism, I want that instructor to report it to me. I have a list of those cases. Same with AI. If there's an inappropriate AI use, I want a list of that. Because again, I will give somebody the benefit of the doubt. This is new technology, this is fine, but my patience doesn't go on forever, right? There are limitations to what is appropriate and what is not. Now, how far you want to push that, I think, is kind of up to you, but that's the way that I've addressed it anyway. Another thing that I think is really important, and I think this is maybe the best way you can approach this, is trying to basically sell the importance of education to students. And as a director of an MBA program, I'll just say it's my experience, most students who come in and talk to me are interested in getting a piece of paper because they think it's going to get them a promotion. They think they're going to move up, they think they're going to make more money. And statistically speaking, they will, right? You could read the ads, and some of them require an MBA, and it's a key to open those doors, right? You can look at the numbers from the Fed that talks about like higher levels of education, statistically speaking, are going to give you higher levels of income, right? That's a correlation. That's out there, right? But to me, I think what's more important isn't this sort of like you just kind of go through the process and do the minimum amount and you get your piece of paper, because then I tell them, like, look, dude, by the time you're done, you're going to end up with imposter syndrome. You're going to run into a boss that's going to ask you a question, look at your MBA, and think that you know what you're talking about. And if you don't, then you're in trouble. So these are great shortcuts, But if you don't slow down and actually immerse yourself in the material and become a master at that, because that's what this is, a master's program, right? This is graduate school, it's hard, right? If you don't do this, then you are shortchanging yourself. Can you get away with it? Maybe, but that's not the way you should do it, and you're doing yourself a disservice if you do, right? So that's a sale that I do every day. And likewise, whenever I go to my classes, and I think philosophically this is an important point too, is we can't go into these things assuming that students are buying what we have to sell them, right? They come into our class and they may think, well, this is not very interesting. I'm here because I have to be, it's, even if they're in a master's program or something, it's like, it's not my favorite class, I'm never going to do accounting, whatever, right? And then maybe that's their attitude. Well, I think it's our job as teachers to do more than that. Like every time I go into a class, I want to sell it to them. By the time they're done, I want them to think that what I've taught them is important or interesting, or if they forget it, they can find it later, right? I mean, it's that teaching to me is sales. And I think understanding the importance of what we are doing as educators, getting the students to buy into the importance of what we are doing as educators, is one of the best ways to promote good use of AI, ethical use of AI, appropriate use of AI. To sum up here, for students, I think some recommendations, right? We use AI as a tool, not as a shortcut. Prioritize learning over grades, developing authentic skills. I think that's my message to students. For instructors, for educators, I think we should show some grace and understanding, and we should create teachable moments, and we need to adapt to this changing landscape. But for both, first of all, we need to be cautious because this is a tool that is still not producing the kind of results you really want. You have to verify the results and challenge AI because its default is sometimes to give you the wrong information and you have to second guess it, and then you have to rely on your own expertise. Don't just trust what it's giving you. Just like everything else on the internet, you've got to double check your sources, right? The same thing is true with AI. At this point, I'm going to pause my own presentation because we are coming kind of toward the end here, but I thought maybe it would be good, like if any of you have questions or stories or insights, or if you want to argue with me and tell me I'm stupid and wrong, that's cool too. But yeah, I thought it would be nice to hear from some of you. So we're here to learn. I'm here to learn too. So what do you got for me? It's getting hot in here, by the way. Yeah.
What would you say to educators who are completely against learning anything about it, touching AI, nothing? No, it's bad, it's wrong, I'm not even going to discuss it. What would you say to educators like that?
Well, see, I'm recording my presentation. I'll put it up on YouTube. You share it with them later. I don't know. I don't have a great answer for that. And in part, I know I'm being facetious, but that's kind of true, is that I think that, they have to be persuaded. I don't think they're completely wrong. I mean, we go back to those 4 different perspectives. One of them is hardcore zero tolerance. So I guess maybe the simple answer would be I would approach them about the possible negative things that could happen because of that zero tolerance policy. That may be the best thing you can do because some people, you're maybe not just going to convince them that there's anything positive about this.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah, please do.
That question?
If you got a better answer, go for it, because mine's not great.
Not better answer, just different. Is I would actually call that a myth, because if they're using detectors, they're using AI.
That's
right?
true.
And,
nice.
And there's kind of this, there's no anti-AI space. Because so if they don't understand how Turnitin works and how they're getting caught because you're using AI, but you don't actually understand how it works because you are also using AI, you're kind of creating your own dichotomy.
Yeah.
In terms of your own, maybe part of the problem.
Well, see, I was thinking actually your question had to do with real purists, like the people who say, no AI in my classroom and I'm not going to check. Because, you're right, there is no other way to check.
I teach freshman English classes, composition classes, and I get a lot of students who are using AI and presenting it to me as if it's something that they wrote. And I have kind of a zero tolerance policy in this respect because, I'm thinking they need to learn this skill in my room. Later on, if they are using it in some different program or at a higher level with some appropriate guidance, that's between them and whichever professor they're working with them. But for me in Comp 1, if you give it to me and you didn't write it, it's plagiarism.
I totally get that. Like, I'm living in a social sciencey world over here where we're verifying facts, right? You're living in a creative world where it's very important. Like, the whole purpose of what you're doing is trying to, foment that creativity and get them to articulate it. Like, what do you think of this idea? Like, my daughter's come up to me before and said, hey, and she's in an advanced, one of the language arts academies, right? And she's like, I don't know what to write about, right? Do you think it's appropriate in that situation to say use AI to come up with ideas?
I don't. I know colleagues of mine do, but I think come up with your own idea.
Right.
I think we have to be careful about the example that we're setting for our students, because we're asking them to constantly interrogate their preconceived ideas, question assumptions, change, evolve. And I think as educators, sometimes we are so hyper-focused on getting the students to behave correctly about AI, and we aren't realizing that we're the ones that have to change first.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I think that's something to keep in mind there. I would never want a student to see me as digging my heels in and I'm not gonna change.
Right. So how do you think we should model change then?
I think by the way we teach the class, the students can see that we're trying to learn and grow. And just because something was a critical skill 10 years ago, or in my case, maybe 30 years ago when I was in school, just because I had to do it doesn't mean they have to do it. Because the world's different now, and I don't want to always, that's the way it has to be. Maybe it is, but let's always be asking those questions, and the students will see us asking those questions, and that will give us credibility in their eyes, I think.
Yeah, and that's one of my axes that I grind when it comes to just, engaging students, is like, at the end of every class, I think we should always ask ourselves, is what I've just taught still relevant? But also, is what I just taught actually engaging? Like, did it actually sink in with students, or is there a better way to make that happen?
I was just gonna, jumping off the English composition thing, I also teach a lot of those courses. I was wondering about, you mentioned brainstorming as a potential useful use.
Yeah.
When I think about the assignments I assign, I give them like a reading, or we talk about something, and I want them to sort of think about the thing and respond to it. And I find the work of responding, or the work of like assessing, analyzing, I find that to be the bulk of the mental work.
Mhm.
And so I'm wondering how asking a machine to brainstorm, how I could even integrate that into that process if what I'm wanting them to do is the brainstorm itself.
Right. My more familiar territory, keep in mind, is sort of like more on the social sciencey sort of stuff. So it's like, if I'm having them do, global business plan, give me an idea of 5 businesses that I might take to a certain region of the world. It's a nice start. So they're like, they can play around with that. It's not giving them the answer, but it may be giving them some choices and stimulating. When it comes to the creative world, that's a more interesting question, right? I mean, it comes back to something he was talking about before. I don't know, are you going to address that? Would you like to? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm actually the librarian here. And do you use Gale databases at your institution?
I don't believe so.
Okay, well, because they have topic finders in the Gale databases,
Yeah.
which are very helpful. And some people may disagree with this, but when students come in and they have zero idea what to do, I ask them to think of something that interests them, stick it into Wikipedia, get a general idea, and then go down to the sources. And you can evaluate the sources, and that is a jumping off point.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Something else I tell students too, if they're using AI, is that you should treat it like Wikipedia, right? That is not the source of authority, although much of what comes out of Wikipedia is fine. It's good, it's a decent encyclopedia source, but you do have to double check those sources at the bottom to make sure that somebody didn't just put something in there that's not true. So you always gotta double check.
I'd also say I teach comp as well, same thing. If you want them to do the initial brainstorm on their own, because I get that, but then they don't know what they don't know. So you could have them use AI, ChatGPT or whatever to challenge the idea that they came up with. So like, what is the flaw here, or what are other things I need to consider, or what's an opposing viewpoint, and then that can give them a jumping off point for further actual
Almost
research.
like a devil's advocate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So to that, and I totally understand like the utility of that, but I guess we were just talking about how if they don't know things, like if I'm ignorant of a topic, I'm much more susceptible to lies or things that are not true that it's telling me. So wouldn't it be better to have them just like find a human writing that opposing viewpoint, I guess? Like what is the utility of using the machine for that is my
They
question.
don't know what to search for.
Yeah.
They don't know how to find that. Absolutely, I agree.
Right.
It should be a person, an expert,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
has that opposing viewpoint, but they don't know what the key term is or what the topic is.
And that's where like the Wikipedia and the sources there can help you get those search terms
Right.
that you wouldn't know.
And
And
my,
then also just searching in your school's databases, every resource will have search terms related to specific items.
Right. And those search terms would help you find it human.
Yeah, yes.
and my old school answer to that is that like also you could always tell them opposing positions too. You know, like if you don't
Well,
feel
yeah,
comfortable with
there's-
AI doing it, like you're the expert, right?
Right.
I think, are we out of time now? Is it like this is when we're done? Okay, so I'm really sorry for those of you who had questions. If you want to talk to me later on, I'll hang out here for a few minutes, or you can catch me later. But thank you very much. You guys are awesome, and catch you next time.